Crow. And there are other individuals who haven't experienced the fullness of it. And it probably is wise of us to unpack what that means in real terms for our community.
Thank you. You mentioned coalition building, and that takes us to another question that we asked around civic engagement. And so we wanted to see like what people really felt around what it means to be engaged in their society and build for social change. And so we asked this question, and we found that only 24% of the people that we talked to said that they were very involved. Like they, were involved in a community organization, which means that a majority of people were not involved. And so, most people who were not involved, suggested that either time or competing priorities were barriers to their involvement. But 40% of those people said that they either didn't know how to get engaged or didn't want to be involved. And so, kind of reflecting on this, what do you think we can do to inspire people to get more involved in their community, in particular around reparations, but also in general civic engagement? Marvin, do you want to go first?
Go to the adcrc.illinois.gov website. We have public open meetings and we encourage the participation of the public. We receive hundreds of public comments, and we are actively taking in those public comments and tendering them to our research team to include those comments and some of those ideas in the harm report, as well as in some of the recommendations that we'll ultimately give to the state legislature. Attend our public hearings. We have just I'm not sure if it's officially published, but we have just figured out our public hearing schedule for next year. Our public hearings will be every other month, starting in February and ending in December of next year. So be on the lookout for that. We have been doing a lot of partnerships with community organizations as well as with news media to kind of begin to educate the Illinois citizenry on the impact and role of slavery in the state of Illinois. As well as, just have the conversations with your family. Do a little research into your own genealogy and where you came from, right? These types of conversations are important and you might be surprised what you find. I think those are all really important ways to kind of begin to ground ourselves in this reparation space as the state, endeavors in its work, as well as the city endeavoring in its work. So
Trace?
Yeah, I would plus one definitely begin the conversations at home. And I think it's everybody's not going to enter civic engagement from the lens of reparations. It's, I think, finding people deciding what they care about the most and connecting with the organization that is working on the things that they care about the most. I think it doesn't really matter what the issue is that starts to politicize people or starts to get people to actively engage. I think once you get folks in the door, then you're able to start making the connections. If you are really involved or concerned about your local school board and you get involved in your LSC and you're thinking about how to make your school stronger, I think that's an on-ramp to these larger conversations that allow people to build the sort of the competency to really engage in conversations around reparations. So I think it's people figuring out and deciding for themselves what is it they care about most and finding the group or organization that is working on the thing that they care about the most. And I think that's we bring people in by what they're passionate about, and then that's how we are then able to expand to start connecting to, all right, well, you care about this school. What's the history of this school? What did this school look like 20 years ago? How did this school end up being this way? And I think that that's the on-ramp to these larger systemic conversations, and having people connected and engaged in ways that really matter and can move the needle.
Right, thank you. And so we're continuing this conversation and having many more conversations about what reparations could look like for Black people in Illinois. So I want to ask the two of you, like, what else do we need to know about our community in order to build power for reparations? What questions could we continue to ask so that we are able to really have a perspective that is as inclusive of the Black experience as possible? What ideas do you have? Marvin, do you want to start? All right, Patrice, do you want to go?
I think it's what I sort of been, I think my takeaway from this, what I've been saying the entire time is, what do you care about the most? What's the thing that, when you look at your children, what's the thing that, what's your top, what comes top of mind? When you look at your parents, what comes top of mind? When you look in the mirror, what is top of mind? I think that's the question that we really need to truly understand from people um, moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, building on that, I think, what is the vision for the Black community? The Bible says that for without a vision, the people perish. Um, we've seen leaders be assassinated, but not dreams. Um, Visions and dreams live on. So making sure that we have a clear understanding on where we're going, um, and then empowering every individual who's a part of the community to truly be a leader, because it's going to take all of us together. And I think that that is probably the biggest thing is both clarity in vision and like-mindedness and purpose.
Great, thank you. So hopefully, please stay on with us as you can because we have question and answers coming next. So again, but thank you for all of your ideas. Thank you for being a part of this conversation with us. I want to welcome Gabby Green, who is our policy and program manager, who's going to help lead us through the questions that have been in the chat.
Thanks, Caitlin, and thank you, panelists. Hey, everyone, I'm Gabby, like Caitlin said. I'm the Policy and Program Manager with BlackRoots Alliance, and I'm coming in to support Q&A. You all have been submitting questions and some comments into the chat. And so I wanted to kind of go over some of the themes that we are hearing as far as the comments, because I want to uplift these as being as important and relating to the conversation we just heard. The importance of knowing your history was uplifted by you all. Specifically, exposing internalized white supremacy within ourselves. You all talked about the need for more educational spaces for people to learn about Black history and why reparations are key to our repair and restoration. You heard Patrice talking about the thin line of negotiating against ourselves, and at what point is it not beneficial for us as a whole? We talked about how to ground ourselves in the reparations movement and what that looks like as far as activating folks towards civic engagement. And the all-important question of, is it good governance or is it reparations? Sounds like a trivia game, right? All right, so we have some questions from the chat. So I'm gonna start with the first one. Shoni asked, why is the thought of reparations for Black Americans viewed as a handout opposed to a debt that is owed? And she specifically relayed to the sentiment that wasn't present during the Japanese Americans' reparations and comparing the two.
Marvin, you want to take that one?
I have theories. I have concepts of a plan. But I think that part of it is just education. I mean, if you look at the literacy rates for US adults, most folks are not reading at level. So when you start talking about history and you make these ties to history, many folks aren't even familiar with Japanese internment. So when you bring that up, it's not something that they're making a direct tie to. Now, I feel like in this space, most individuals in the space are well read, relatively speaking. But when you go out and you talk to an average American, you're not thinking about Japanese internment right now. They're thinking about trying to put groceries on the table, right? Food on the table, roof over the head, good old American dream. So some of this is due to kind of it's an indictment on the education system, but also an indictment on just the type of conversations that we have as a society, right? To make sure that in a similar way with the Jewish community in Germany, we never forget, right? Like this is something that is top of mind so that we don't relive the past mistakes.
I would say that it's just the continued anti-Blackness. It's like the continued narrative that Black people, Black people are less than, Black people aren't equipped to, make decisions for ourselves, that we need the support, we need We need the help. We, aren't competent enough. I mean, I think that those narratives, it's why, we weren't allowed to read during slavery. It was illegal to teach us to read, right? I think it's just a continuation of that same line of thought in modern day. I don't think it's anything more than that. It's just a continuation.
I think I also want to kind of share some of what has come up from the data when people had said that they felt like reparations would not have any impact. A lot of it was what Patrice, you and Marvin had just shared. Was there's a belief of some Black people that because they themselves did not go through what actual enslaved people went through, that there's this disconnect between history and the experience. And so that is both a little bit of internalized white supremacy and also an opportunity for us to talk about our history in a different way. And also people have shared that part of the reason why they believe the way that they did around reparations not having an impact or it being a handout or all of these things, they actually had never been asked the question before and had not had the time to really dig into it for themselves. And that's part of the reason why we at BlackRoots Alliance have been having this conversation and asking the same questions for thousands of people to give people an opportunity to really answer for themselves without parroting other answers that they've heard or making assumptions, but really wrestling with the complexity for themselves. And so I think all of that kind of comes into play and how people have responded to why their resistance to reparation from internal Black conversation.
I mean, even thinking about how broader American society deals with the idea of epigenetics and trauma and how it can be passed down, right? Thinking about like the Dutch famine birth cohort study, which showed that children that were born to individuals who experienced the potato famine still showed signs of that same trauma, despite the fact that it was 43 or 50 years later, right? What does it mean for individuals who experienced the trauma of enslavement? And what impact does it have on their descendants, and how long does it take for that to dissipate? Those are all questions that I have, in my personal research. Like, okay, society is different than what it was when we were enslaved. Sure, I'll give you that, but it doesn't mean that the impacts of what happened during enslavement have dissipated.
Thanks for that, y'all. The next question comes from Fania, and I think this is a question for you, Marvin, because you were spewing off a lot of historical context there. The question is simple. How do we get this history to the people?
I think part of it is just trying to have conversations where meet folks where they are. In addition to trying to publicize the information as best as possible. In our public hearings, we start off our public hearings with expert testimony from individuals who are well-read, well-researched, well-studied in these spaces to ground the public hearing in data, in fact, in history. And then we allow the public to build on that, to add their own personal anecdotes and personalized stories and narratives to that research. So that's just part of it, but it's going to take a lot more than just that. It's going to take each and every single one of us to kind of dig deep and to have these conversations as well.
Awesome, thank you. All right, Brooks asked and commented that white Americans will be a major force in determining reparations for Black Americans. Should there be any resources sent to influence non-white groups to convince the need for reparations?